Hey, good afternoon. Today we're talking about one of the most expensive mistakes that professionals can make, and how I personally have made this mistake in my own business, hiring advisors who don't understand the life that you're building. And I've learned this through personal experience, not because the people that I hired were incompetent, but because their framework for how life and work operate was really, I'll say it was smaller than the life that I was actually designing for myself. So let's talk about how this works. If you are building an unconventional life, um, like myself, I think that I have an unconventional life. Since 2018, I've lived abroad while building my own business. I've lived in 10 countries while I've been doing that. And that's really sort of unconventional. When I talk to a lot of people um, who don't live this way, they don't even realize that this kind of a life is an option. They think, oh, you got to be rich in order to live that way. Or they have a business, but they believe that in order to have this type of a life, you have to first make the millions of dollars first. None of that is the truth. As a matter of fact, I like to believe that my life has expanded in many ways because of the leap that I have taken in creating the life that I want. And that I've been able to travel. And it's because I've been able to travel and expose myself to different experiences, different types of people, different cultures, different languages. It's because I choose to live that way that, as a result, my business expands at the same time. Um, yeah, so if you're building an unconventional life or you're stepping into a new chapter of your life, whether it's an influence in leadership or public voice, the people that you take advice from matters deeply. Why? Because advice is never neutral. It always comes from someone's worldview. And so I want to give you a couple of examples. A few years ago, I lived in Rwanda, tiny country in uh, East Africa. Beautiful country. Absolutely loved my time there. So I was living there full time while working my business. I was doing a lot of freelance writing, as well as supporting people who were writing books at that time. Um, I decided that I wanted to hire a therapist, just to be able to talk about, family stuff that was going on at the time. This was a Black woman therapist that was important to me. The woman was highly credentialed, very experienced, highly capable professional. I want that to be clear. And she was located in the United States, and we were communicating via video, sort of like, what we are doing here, just having conversation via video. And so during one particular session, I started to describe what my life looked like in Rwanda. Um, and so we talked about how living abroad actually shaped the issue that I came to actually work through with her. And then something interesting happened during our conversation. What I realized is that instead of focusing on the actual issue, she became really fascinated with the lifestyle. And so, of course, if you've ever been, I'm sure that you've sat on a conversation or been in a conversation with a therapist. They ask you questions. They ask you questions about your life and what you're doing and all sorts of things. But in that conversation, she is asking questions about my life in Rwanda and all the other countries that I've lived in. How I came to be living abroad and living this big international life. And what I realized in that moment was that the conversation was no longer about the issue that I had come to actual therapy for. Um, her framework for how life worked for me didn't include someone living the way that I was living, right? And so she just got really super fascinated and she was asking me questions that it started off feeling like it was about the issue that we were talking about, but it actually started to go in a different direction. Um, and that often happens with people who don't live like I do. Um, and it's not that she was wrong, it's not that that viewpoint, the viewpoint that her questions were wrong. Perhaps it was in the wrong place, of course. But she wasn't wrong for actually being curious about the life that I live. And I actually don't mind answering questions about how I live. I actually really love to be able to share how I live with people, just to be able to help them expand their possibilities about how it is that they live and what they would like to be able to do with their own lives. Um, but I realized that her framework was much too small for the context of my life. And as a therapist, that I would probably need someone else who wasn't necessarily fascinated by my choices, um, and would be able to focus on the task at hand, so to speak, the task at hand, which was offering the doggone therapy sessions that I had paid for. And so I wound up seeing her 2 or 3 times, and I just sort of ended the therapy sessions after that. Second instance where this happens, this time it was with a business coach. I hired a business coach, again, Black woman, very experienced, very well versed in online business. Pay her a nice amount of money to be able to work together. And there were 2 different sessions where we had worked together that kind of set, I won't call them red flags, but just call them yellow flags. Set yellow flags off in my mind. Say, it's something you might want to pay attention to this. She knew that I had lived abroad and was, doing things abroad. In private conversation, it had come up that I had grown up in New Jersey. In another conversation, which was in a group coaching session, this was a formal group coaching session. Somehow it had come up, I forget how, but somehow it had come up that my company is actually located in Florida. As I travel the world, my company, the mailbox is located in Florida. Why? Because I lived in when I set up the mailbox, I was actually physically full-time living in Florida. And so I set up a mailbox there, so that I wouldn't have mail coming to my physical address. I had it actually going to an online mailbox. And that was how I got my mail, even before I had set up to be able to go overseas. Um, and when I mentioned that, she sort of stops the coaching session and she says out loud, "Oh, but I thought you said that you lived in New Jersey." And her tone sort of suggested that she believed that she had sort of caught me in some sort of a lie, big lie, small lie, I don't know. Um, but and that sort of set up the yellow flag in my head because I was just kind of confused. It didn't seem right for us to be in the middle of a coaching session with other people. And it was like she was trying to catch me in, some sort of a lie, especially after I had already paid you money. It's not like, I was sitting in there for free. And I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me that someone would pay you a good amount of money and lie in your face about who they are, what they do, and where they live. That doesn't make sense to me. But I don't know, maybe in her life she meets people that way. Um, but yeah, the reality for me was very simple. As I explained, I grew up in New Jersey, lived in Florida, actually lived in a few different states in the United States before I permanently moved overseas. Um, or not even permanently moved overseas, but decided that I wanted to be able to travel to different countries while running my business. And the truth is that her worldview didn't include people who moved. She was from someplace in the Midwest. And in her world, you grew up in a place, you got married, you had children in one place. And her big dream was to one day be able to create a home somewhere in the islands, I believe she had said at one point, which is a wonderful dream. Um, but I don't think that she had met anyone who had done that without the millions of dollars, which is what I have done. I didn't need $1 million to be able to travel to 10. I've lived in 10 countries. Even before I had, moved to lived in the 10 different countries since 2018, I had, stints of working and living in West Africa and in a few other places that I have lived in, um, a decade or two before moving overseas even happened. But that doesn't happen in her world. And so again, her worldview simply didn't include the possibility of someone like me living across multiple places and designing a global life. So in that instance, we were not a good match for us to be able to work together. Because if you're thinking I'm coming to your sessions and I'm lying about who I am and what I'm doing, I'm not paying you any money, right? That's how I feel. And so what's the lesson here? This isn't really about criticizing people or criticizing these two individuals, the therapist and the business coach. Both of them were capable people, capable professions. As I said before, they were highly credentialed, well-versed in what it is that they did for a living. But for me, as a person who is looking for advisors to help me with my life and my business, when someone can't understand the scale or the shape of the life that you're trying to build, they can't they cannot fully um, they can't fully advise you inside of that life. Advice I am learning is always shaped by someone's understanding of what is possible, both for them and for you. And so if they've got some hangups about what they can and cannot achieve, best believe that that's going to color the advice that they give you. So if you're looking for, words of affirmation, if you need inspiration, if you need, just hardcore strategy on where you can go in your business and in your life, um, and they don't believe that they can do it for themselves, well, I think this is going to be a waste of a conversation. And what I'm saying is that I no longer use that as my standard. I used to think that just because a person had the qualifications on paper, then that was enough. So this is the standard that I use now. So now when I hire advisors, coaches, therapists, collaborators, anybody that's connected to my business. And I'm saying business because I'm super focused on business right now. And I am super focused on supporting women who are also looking for this type of support. I'm not only asking, are they qualified or are they good at what they do? But I also ask, can they understand the type of life that I am trying to build? Why? Because I'm not interested in hanging out in circles where I have to shrink my story. I'm really excited about the fact that I get to move around. I like to be able to share my story of, what my life looked like before I started traveling, which is, I'm not shy about sharing that I've lived a life where I was very depressed, that I've been divorced, um, that there were a lot of things that I wanted to do and couldn't afford to do it. And even when I did move overseas, I still couldn't afford to do a lot of things. But because I took the leap and decided to be able to bet on myself, I was able to develop the resources to be able to sustain the life that I have. For 7 going on 8 years now, I've been overseas and have been able to live in some beautiful places around the world, in Asia, Europe, Africa, and now living in Latin America and Mexico. Um, and a lot of people will tell you that you have to sit and wait and develop the resources first before you're allowed to do all those big things. And my life is an example that that's not necessarily true. And so I'm no longer interested in shrinking my story. Um, I don't want to have to work with people where I have to explain basic context of thinking big repeatedly to people. And I don't want to have to justify decisions that are obvious to me within the life that I have designed for myself. Like, I don't want people to look at me and be like, you can do that, or yeah, I don't want to have to explain that all the damn time. I want people who can advise me and think at that level with me, or even better. Like, I want you to be able to come from a space where, where you're blowing my mind, right? And so I want to be clear that this is not wholly about money only. I've met people with significant wealth in my travels. A lot of people who built great wealth on the internet. Some of them, inherited stuff and, invested well. I've met people who are, I guess you wouldn't necessarily put them in the category of rich, but they've arranged their lives so that they don't have to work so hard, and they live well with what they have. Um, and so with the people that I've met who have the significant wealth, I will also find that they are living lives where they are still deeply confined to things like a big house. They got the big fancy car with the big fancy payment attached to it. They might take 2 vacations a year if they're lucky. All of those come with big obligations. What I also find is that they leave very little room for them to be able to think, for them to be able to explore, to be able to design the next stages of their life with any sort of intention. And so what I've been building with my life, rather than getting the big house, the big car, and all this other stuff, is that I am more excited about building my creative space. So sure, I'd love to have a house, and I'm working on having the house, but it's not because it has to be a status symbol to be able to show that, to be as proof of my big online nightmare that I'm creating and can't escape from. But my house is a reflection of my own space. This is my own creative space. I want a space that has room for me to paint. Painting has absolutely nothing to do with how I make my money. But painting is important to me as a person because it makes me a well-rounded person. What else makes me a well-rounded person? My writing. Yes, writing has a lot to do with what I do for a living, but not all of the writing that I do, I get paid for, at least not directly. So there's painting, my cooking. At some point, cooking again is going, well, I actually just sent in an article to a place where to an online place where I talk about one of my habits, my cooking habits. So yeah, the cooking does make me money, but I want a space where I'll be able to practice that on a regular basis and feel like I'm expanded in doing it. Also, my herbs, I want to have an Ayurvedic garden. So my home then becomes a creative space. It's not just a mortgage. It's a place where my creativity gets to expand. I get to live a life where I live geographic flexibility. I live a life where I have intellectual freedom. I want my library back. Years ago, I had a beautiful library of cookbooks from all different traditions, all different cultures, all different thoughts of eating. And at some point, it literally got lost. That's a long story. Um, but I lost it. Um, Still contain a lot of the knowledge, because what I would do is I would read cookbooks like novels, literally front to back. I don't know very many people who read cookbooks like that, but it helped me to learn technique. Helped me to learn, ingredients, all sorts of things. And so when people ask me about how do I know so much about cooking, it's because I like quite literally sat down and taught myself. And so that's what I want. I have intellectual freedom to learn the things that make me excited. I have work that integrates with how it is that I want to live. And that kind of life requires advisors who can understand it. They may not do the exact same thing that you're doing. They may not choose to live in the exact same way that you want to live, but they should be able to understand it and to be able to function when you mention it to them, and not get caught up in their personal feelings about, and maybe personal jealousy, or maybe that they're thinking that, oh, you're living wrong or you're doing things in the opposite way. I'm not interested in postponing happiness and good health for the hope that maybe I'll live past the age of 50. I've already explained to you many times on this channel. I lost my mother when she was 49 years old. She did not expect to die at 49 years old of breast cancer. She fully expected to grow at least until her 80s. And so I fully understand that life is not promised to us, and that I'm not saying be irresponsible with what you're doing. I'm just saying sit down and thoughtfully design how it is that you want to live, where you want to live, what do you want to be doing. All those questions are important. I want to add another layer to this as we're having this conversation. Your lifestyle, or the lifestyle that you are in the process of creating, is a part of your message, as your message as a consultant, trainer, author, speaker, whatever it is that you do, right? Especially if your work involves ideas, leadership, writing, or public influence. People are not only here to connect with your credentials. Ladies, I need you to perk your ears up here, because this comes up in men tell us all the time in dating that they don't want to date your credentials or your resume. And when I heard men say this in particular, I was like, who the hell does that? Who's leading with their resume? And then I started meeting women who are actually leading life with their resume, with their credentials, with their degrees. We are so glad that you have these credentials, your degrees, and I completely can empathize with the fact that that has helped you to survive whatever it is that you needed to survive in order to get to this point in life. But as a human being, you've got to have more going on than just your credentials, the certificate that you gained. We need to know what your lifestyle looks like behind the thing that you're doing. Doesn't mean that you got to show every bit of your life and all your personal information is out hanging out there on the internet. That's not what I'm saying. You can share things. You can share your values with people. Share your values with people in your life. without necessarily sharing everything. And the reason why this is important is because people like to connect with context. It's great that you got the credentials, but we need context around how and why you got it and why this is important to you. Your audience, they need to be able to understand the life behind your thinking. So, what do they want to know? What does your audience want to know? Maybe you're planning a cross-country drive to visit your grandparents at a family barbecue. That might be something that you share on social media or a blog post or a newsletter, because it demonstrates that you value family, you value legacy, you value, if you're doing this with other family members, you value creating memories with people. Same thing if you were doing, maybe you have a standing ritual with your kid on Saturday mornings. You get up on Saturday mornings and you eat cereal in the morning. Not necessarily the healthiest thing, but that's not necessarily the point. The ritual is the cereal and the cartoons. You have a bowl or two of cereal and you watch a couple of cartoons. That is a memory that you are creating with your child, because making memories with your child is a value that you hold dear to your heart. Why? Because there's going to be a day when your kid ain't going to want cereal and cartoons with you on a Sunday morning. They will grow out of that phase, and you'll create a new ritual maybe. But it's nice when people are able to connect with you and what it is that you value without having to share everything about your life. Do you dream about moving to Florida and starting a fruit tree business along with what it is that you already do? Or maybe you want to do that in India. I don't know. Maybe you want to move to Wisconsin and start a dairy farm and start an artisanal cheese business. I don't know. I'm just making up stuff. But the point is that that the people that you connect with value certain things, and we connect to them because we also value certain things. I remember there was a writer, I can't remember her name. I used to read a lot of her stuff. It was a lot of online stuff. Maybe it was in a Substack somewhere. But she was a writer and had a writing business. And she was coaching people. But she had also packed up her life and moved to Italy and bought an olive farm, an olive grove. And she was making olive oil, like artisanal, small batches of olive oil. And I just thought that was freaking amazing. A lot of us think that we are only allowed to do one thing in life. And here she is, she's got this online business that she really enjoyed. And she also had this really other crazy dream of going to Italy to go and sell olive oil. Not even selling the olive oil, but even more so the buying the olive grove and doing the work to be able to bottle the olive oil. And there's a whole process involved with doing that. I have absolutely no desire to do it, but the fact that she did it, I'm fascinated. I was tuned into what it is that she was doing, and I think she had a Substack, and she had and I paid her for a subscription for it for quite a while, because that story of watching someone else fall in love with different aspects of their life was really interesting to me. I need to know more about you. If you want me to give you money, I need to know more about you than just your credentials. Your credentials are a place to start, but who are you beyond that, right? So these types of experiences shape your perspective, they shape your priorities, and they shape the ideas that you bring into the world. These are not distractions from your work, but rather they are often the foundation of it. I can't tell you how much painting and drawing or learning how to paint and draw from scratch has opened me up to the type of work that I am doing now. It's made me relax. It's made me more of a creative thinker. I'm less critical of myself because of it. And it's not even that the work that I'm doing is so awesome or, good. I put good in quotes because a lot of times we think that, if your work is not worthy of being put um, into a gallery somewhere, then, there's no reason to be able to talk about it. But it really it continues to shape who I am. And so if I just sat back and said, well, I have a master's degree where I did a lot of writing, or I got this certificate from this university, um, I think I would be less interesting. I would probably still be back in the States, just really frustrated, trying to sell people a thing that nobody was connecting with. I hope this is making sense. The life that you have in and outside of your work matters. And so these are the things that make you distinct from other people. Without these stories, many professionals become interchangeable. You'll just be another expert. You're another consultant. You're another person online selling some stuff. But when people understand the life behind your ideas, your work becomes multidimensional. And these stories, these experiences actually shape your life and often become the ideas that you share publicly. So these stories then become the books that you write. These are the essays that you publish. These are the talks that you go out and you give in public or online. These are the ideas that people get to know you for, because your life gives your thinking more depth. So I got a couple questions that I want to ask you. When you look at the people who are advising you in your life, do they understand the life that you are building? Ask yourself that question. And can they think at the scale of your future? I'll say it again. Can they think at the scale of your future? Scale, SCALE. Can they think at the scale of your future? And just as a bonus question, are you allowing your life to show up in your work? If you don't do nothing but answer that last question, you would have done great work today. Are you allowing your life to show up in your work? This was a lot. I'm glad I did this video. I actually let this topic sort of sit because I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. I really hope that this lands with whomever is supposed to get this message today. So in closing, because I'm kind of losing my voice, you don't need everybody to understand your life and what you're doing. But the people who are advising you, or even the people who are collaborating with you or walking alongside you, should be able to see the scale of what it is that you are building. And because The right advisors don't question your life. They actually help you build it. The right advisors don't question your life. They actually help you build it. It's the advisors, the people who are collaborating with you, and even the people who are cheering on the sidelines. They need to be able to understand what it is that you value. Okay? So that is all I have today. If you would like to be able to stay connected to me, I would love for you to click the link in the description box. And that's all I have today. I will get back to you tomorrow in tomorrow's video. My name is Halana Black. Have a great day.